To ask questions to any of the panelists, please. So, yes, please get up, and if you can have a mic, just go ahead and ask. Please
Okay,
go ahead.
actually, when we talk about the startup India, usually means people means I actually heard many this kind of discussion. They said that we have to translate our work to common people like that. Means is it like okay? Actually, one can do is some product that has market in India and it can manufacture in India and sell it.
Right.
But one can also do is like if the market is not in India but abroad, but still he can make the product in India and export it. So I just want to know what are the opportunities and challenges one will face in the other case. Like if actually in both the cases, like if I have a market in India, so what are the opportunities and that I will get, and if the product that it has a small market in India but has bigger
Yeah.
market abroad. So
Yeah.
what are the opportunities and challenges that one
Okay,
has to face?
great, good question. I'm actually going to request Raghu to take, about making maybe discoveries in India and for products that are only for the US. If you can, then maybe Gayatri for the other question. So.
Okay, so I think Prem mentioned something that I'd like to echo, and that will just lead to the answer, is that I walked around the posters. I haven't actually seen all of them. I saw a good number of them, and I can tell you that I found at least 6 or 7 that if I were involved in it, I would think about how to make them into discoveries that could actually lead to a biotech. So that means, just as Prem said, there's great, excellent science going on here. So you just have to recognize its, biotech sort of potential. So as far as discoveries in India, I think that every discoverer in India, every scientist, all of you people sitting here, should stop thinking about making a difference with that discovery in India, but think globally. Making a discovery that'll change the global scene with your discovery, because that's the way to think about biotech. So in that sense, I guess my answer is very clear. Every discovery you'll make here, if it is innovative enough and it'll make a discovery, make a change or bring a drug to India, it is a drug for the rest of the world. So I would think globally always, and then when you think globally, of course, India is involved.
Thank you. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah, please, Gayatri. If you just want to add, if I understood the second part of the question, it had to do with, make in India and sell in India, I think so.
So, and also exporting, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, if you're going to export, it depends which country you're trying to export to. There are the less regulated markets, the highly regulated markets. And I would also say that, for instance, for medical devices, entrepreneurs often go for what's called the CE mark, which is the European stamp of approval to market even in India, because India doesn't have, so far, has not had a sort of stamp of its own. So, I mean, I don't know further specifics. It would depend on what exactly you're trying to export. But, you could probably find an entrepreneur in that area who could guide you. We have enough entrepreneurs with enough experience now who have been exporting. So I'm not really a good person to answer that.
Okay, great. So the next question, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Kishore. I work in CCMB. I'm a PhD student.
I'm sorry for interrupting,
Yes.
But Uday, may I make one point in answer to the
Oh,
first
absolutely, please.
It's actually to emphasize something really important that Ram said, which is don't just think about biotech and innovation in terms of drugs. Different ways of doing things, devices, platforms, technologies, and these two, that type of thing has an impact potentially worldwide.
Yeah.
That's the point I wanted to emphasize.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I have a situation here, like I want to replace aspirin in the context, say for research reagents we use in our labs. Say every antibody we largely import from West, and each of them cost on an average around 35,000. And now I understand that each of these antibodies could have been produced and marketed in India at a cost of maybe 2,000 or 2,500. Well, so this astronomically high cost of research reagents, not only antibodies, but other reagents also, say small sodium chloride chemicals like that. So these reagents, high cost has a lot of burden, economical burden on our research labs. Well, I want to target this question to Gayatri or if anybody else. What will be the challenges if suppose I try to replace these reagents in India, make in India and sell in India for Indian labs? What would be the primary challenges would a person will face if he tries to replace these reagents?
Very good question. Many times asked this question. We have done economic analysis on whether or not you will actually make money at all. You want to sustain a company selling reagents in India. The total budget of the Department of Biotechnology is $300 million, out of which about half of it goes to salaries and overheads. So the total amount of money spent on reagents in India in a global context is very, very, very small. So for you to set up we have done this very careful analysis, and I'm sure Shreyas is here from CCAM, we can share this. It's not a profit. You will never make money selling it to India. Only way you will do this is if you get a market share outside of India. Just to make it cheaper for India is not a viable business proposition. And this is the mistake often scientists make, not think of the business proposition of the product you want to launch. There is no business proposition in that if you want to sell it to India.
Gayatri, I think the other panelists would also like to add to that.
I'll be brief, but this is an anecdote, but I think it has relevance. So some of you in the audience may know a man called Jonathan Milner, who founded a company called Abcam, which is now a multi-billion-dollar business. Jonathan and I were postdocs in Cambridge at roughly the same time, in fact, working on the same problem, but he clearly chose a much more successful route. And what Jonathan recognized was simply a gap in the market for how people order antibodies. And Abcam, I still remember Jonathan walking around with an ice bucket trying to find out how all of us in the different institutes were ordering antibodies. And he started Abcam simply as a cheaper, more efficient way to find the right antibody, which he was not making, and order it through a single one-click website. Of course, Abcam has become a billion-dollar business which makes many of its own antibodies. But I think the answer to your question is, look, there are many ways to address the problem you are talking about. And it need not be make in India. Maybe it's just a better, more efficient way of sourcing. It's an entirely different business proposition. And as Ram said, you have to really figure out what's the best way to achieve it.
Excellent. Raghu, did you want to add to that, or we have more questions?
I just, very briefly, just to add to the point, is that in biological sciences, we are driven by the idea that we must be rigorous and validate. So the idea of using antibodies that other investigators have used becomes an issue of importance. And that's why we tend to sometimes use the same antibodies that others have used and validated them to use. So I think that there's also that aspect you have to take into consideration. If you generate them again in a different company, then you'll have to go through the validation process. So I think what was suggested is that if you can talk to these people who can then bring these products to you cheaper in a way that you can work together and order in mass and things like that is a better way.
Yeah, thank you. Manny, I know you've been standing for a while. So.
Yeah, actually I'll really give you the toughest question that you cannot, maybe I don't know if you can answer it.
Not me.
No, I've been in drug development for 25 years. Worked for Johnson & Johnson, Wyeth, the big giants. The one thing I've seen is since 1990 to 2017, I have the chart from US FDA approvals. I think even 1940s, about 30 drugs are approved. Even today, only 40 drugs are approved by US FDA. In terms of the productivity, there's really nothing changed in terms of the drug approvals number. And the other thing is, to add to the 1970s, your cost of drug development is about $200 million. Now it's about $2.5 billion on average. And if you take Alzheimer's, there's no drug at all, and all the billions and billions that are put in is already down the drain. Now the toughest question is, of course, basic research is very, very important, and doing drug discovery is very important. What the problem is now, you're touching a real tough subject like personalized medicine and precision medicine. Each drug maybe work only for 10% of the people, not for 100% of the people like we used to think. Okay, not one size fits all. With all these concepts that is going, the costs are escalating, and the drug development, actually approvals are flat. What do you think is the future for drug discovery in India with that kind of a concept that is going on?
Did you have a specific member you wanted to address this to, or?
I think anybody can address, because everybody is talking about drug discovery here.
Okay, I think Ashok is volunteering. Yeah.
You've touched on an important problem, and I grabbed the microphone because this has actually been the focus of some of the things that we have been doing in the platform companies that have come from the lab. Drug discovery, as you correctly point out right now, is expensive, often fails to deliver a product that reaches market. And there are many problems, but clearly one of them is not just identifying targets, but in any given therapeutic indication, trying to identify the best targets. And that's not as easy as it sounds. Even pharma companies will acknowledge that of the many targets that they develop medicines against, very few of them actually become marketed drugs. So my answer to your question in part would be, I think there's a lot of opportunity in India or anywhere else in the world at finding different ways in any given system, for any given pathway, for any given therapeutic application, of finding better or potentially what one might call the best targets in that given system to increase the chance that you can actually deliver a product that reaches market.
Thank you. Sure, go ahead, Deidre.
Maybe I could add a comment here as well. One of the things we're starting to see with the big pharma companies now is that they're looking differently at targets. And instead of thinking that there is a single target for a single disease, we're now looking at multiple targets for a disease. And that's a really big fundamental change in the way to develop reagents and the way to develop drugs. And it's something that's really starting to gain momentum.
Great. Thank you very much. I know there was a question. The lady has been waiting for a while, so maybe she can go first.
I thank all the panelists for their valuable suggestion. My question is that very often we get excited to develop a product. Do we have to care about intellectual property? And how much do we have to care, and where do we find the information?
Yeah, Raghu, go ahead, please.
Well, obviously, as you just said, if you're very excited about your discovery, then in the process of that, doing your experiments and your studies, you obviously are reviewing the literature and looking around. So you will know by that itself whether your discovery is unique or not. And I think that that's the best way to first approach it. And of course, after that, your institution can aid you in finding out if there's something involved. But I would say that you would know it. If you design your experiments in a way, you would know what the competition is, who is out there, and what they have done. And that gives you an idea of the intellectual property you can protect for your discovery.
Yeah. I think we're going to take 2 more questions, and then, yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for a wonderful session. I came here reluctantly but couldn't go back. It's been very enlightening. So I have 2 questions actually. So one is that sometimes we get ideas, not actually products, or it's not even a proof of concept. But I just want to bounce it off somebody who has a holistic approach. So this is more about the opportunity to do that. And if somebody can enlighten about the opportunities available right now to do so. And the other is about, the second question is about taking the leap from maybe completing your doctorate or your postdoctorate and actually taking the shot at doing a startup, and how courageous it is to do so. And of course, you talked about the funding having providing some cushion to that, but still, how do you know that your idea is really worth it, and do you get mentorship for that?
I think that, Gayatri, do you want to take that, or and then maybe we can also have somebody else.
So at least coming to your second one, probably, if you're in academia, you're not meeting too many people who've gone down that path. And I think you're absolutely right, and it's absolutely crucial to meet such people beforehand, as many as you can, and bounce your idea off all of them. And I don't think you have to worry too much about your idea being stolen. Many people have a similar idea, but finally it's the execution to get it done. So just grab everyone you can to discuss it with. And, as somebody said, networking, you talk to Rams and he'll send you to somebody, and you can get half a dozen people's opinion. And then, of course, there is also BIRAC, which provides grants which will cushion your initial efforts. You don't even have to start a company. They will fund you pre-company if they think that you have a reasonable idea. And they give generous money. And in Karnataka, we have another scheme which is similar to the big grant, which again will fund pre-companies. So you do have a period to experiment.
Yeah,
it's actually, I'm just taking the microphone to him, but it's actually quite exciting that you're saying that, because that's exactly the type of people we need, ideas you want to discuss.
Okay, great. So very good question. And I'm sure many people are thinking about this. So there is a fantastic way to do this. So many agencies, including ABLE, CCAMP, and others, we run idea competitions. We run grant challenges competitions. So the best way to try whether an idea is good or not is to say, I have an idea, and I think it's a good idea, and enter one of these competitions. You will get good, fantastic feedback, because often the judges are people who have been entrepreneurs who have made money, have done this. And the other thing that we do at CCAMP is, I think once a month, the Thursday, we have an evening session where you can come and talk to all the entrepreneurs who are there and throw your idea, and they will just tear you apart. And it doesn't mean your idea is bad. It just allows you then to say, what are the things I need to think about if I want to take this idea into the next level? And then you can use what Gayatri said of trying to find out how to raise money. The most important thing that at least happened to me, even though I said I won't talk about myself, is I made sure that I have friends who are not biologists, right? Majority of, I don't stay in a campus accommodation. I purposely stay outside. My neighbors are IT guys, business guys, lawyers. Just talk to them. But the most important thing I do, and I tell everybody, is talk to your mother. If you can excite your mother of your idea, you have actually a very good idea.
Great. Thank you. I think one last comment from Deirdre, and then we'll take one last question. Just 1 second.
One of the things that was I learned very early on in the whole process, and this really came from talking to other people who'd set up companies, other entrepreneurs, and it was a very important lesson to learn, and that is you need to know your market. You might think you know your market, or you might think that what you've got is the best thing in the world, but you can't force something on a market that is not responsive. So you really need to understand what that need is out there. And in fact, when I was spinning out my biotech startup company, I actually did a business course at the University of Western Australia, and part of that learning process was all about understanding the market. You really need to do that. It's most important.
Yeah, well, the last question.
Can I just make a counterpoint to this? It's always not necessary, right? You can create market. The iPad didn't have a market. We created it. The Fitbit I wear had no market. We created it. It's true for pharma. It's not true for other stuff. You can create a market. Think about that a little carefully, because it's a very interesting mental exercise that you can do, and I'm happy to share interesting products that have come to market when people have said there's no market, it won't work, but they went about creating a market. But it requires a lot of money.
Great. Last question, please.
Okay, let's assume I am very good in protein purification. I am purifying a certain protein from maybe 2 liters of the culture. I know this protein is going to do great in market, and I want to learn how to purify this from 10,000 liters maybe. But yes, I'm trained in basic biology, and I do it from a very small amount. I want to learn it. But at this age and at this stage of life, we cannot sustain with a hole in the pocket. So if I go abroad or even in India and I do postdoc, I know I will have something to sustain. But how am I going to sustain if I try to learn this from an industry? First thing. Second thing, even if I learn it and come back, I do not have a structure to do it, a company or a setup to do it. So I just want to ask, at policy level or at the funding level, what are the scope? What is the scope for students who don't want to continue with basic science or do research or do want to go in entrepreneurship, but not with empty pocket?
Great question. I'm actually going to request Dr. Ramji Palela to answer this first, and then we'll have people on the stage. Ramji Palela is a chief manager, and he manages a lot of the BIRAC programs at IKP. So,
I'd like to say that, for students or faculty members, retired personnel, or innovators, individuals, anybody can actually, apply for many grants from BIRAC. So it is designed very strategically, BIG, for example, where I'm the program manager. So the idea, whether it's feasible or not, whether it is really suitable to the scheme or not, we'll be telling. So this lady, when she asked about, how to scale up. So for that, there is a different kind of scheme that is available in BIRAC. You can actually protect your idea first, maybe in terms of patent or something, if your institute is helping in that. And you can actually tie up with some industry for validation. I think I'm right, Rams and all. You can please correct me in case. So that is the kind of CRS scheme. And specifically for the academicians, BIRAC came up with some grants called, under PACE scheme, PACE. One is AIR, Academic Innovation Research, and other one is CRS, Contract Research Services Scheme. So the stage that you mentioned, the situation that you have, accordingly you have different grants. And I think offline, I can help them. Whoever is there with many questions, please contact me so I can help you. Yeah,
great.
Thank you. Thanks.
I think that's perfect. We won't take any more questions, but I want to wrap up now. But before I do that, I'd like Madhu to come up here and maybe have a couple of words of wisdom, because he's now the CEO for the incubator at CCMB. So he's also a very shy person,
Thank you very much. Thank you, Uday, for taking care of this program. And thank you all the panelists for being here and then sharing your views. And yeah, it is, I wish we had a much longer one and then much more personal one in terms of clearing up, because you're here and then a lot of people have many doubts, I guess. And one of the things that I just wanted to advertise for ourselves, that is for CCMB, is many people talk about this valley of death from a lead to the proof of concept. Many people talk about it. And then as everybody's saying, there is a lot of opportunities. In fact, one of the things we keep trying to tell people is the difference between IT revenue model and BT revenue model. There is obviously biotechnology or cell biology is a high risk, high returns kind of a venture, and the return of investment is going to be a little longer than what you expect from IT. So these are all the differentiating factors from other kind of activities that people are very familiar in this country. So we want, in CCMB at least, we wanted to create a kind of awareness, a mentorship network that probably answers many questions that came up, essentially in terms of IP, value propositions, whether there is a market or not out there, and what kind of compliances that are required, which is what Ram is very familiar with all these things. But that is in Bangalore, but we want to have the similar kind of setup in Hyderabad and maybe better one. So I would request all of you to come and visit who are interested in starting a small startup. I can tell you there are several opportunities. Today the problem is people are not aware of these things as much as they should be. So I think one of the responsibilities of our place is to bring these things, these kind of, even the minister mentioned so many of them. So we want to bring them up and then show it to the people. And then, as somebody said earlier, one success is enough to have a snowballing effect on the rest of the people. So I hope our center at CCMB would be a catalyst in this kind of activity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to wrap up. I have a couple of notes that I took as final messages from what the expert said. I'm just going to say that I think we heard the word passion a lot of times. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to be passionate about it. I don't think this is something like you do from 9 to 5. It's pretty much 24/7, 365. So passion is important. Unmet need, identifying that there is a room for a product. I think we heard a lot of the experts say that too. I think that's a second critical thing. Third is teamwork. I think, Prem has been saying that you need to collaborate. You need chemists, so you just can't do it yourself. So open up yourself to be teamwork. And the last, which is, I think is, I gave you the example of my father. He couldn't take a risk. He had many good ideas, but we now have risk-taking ability. So I think the current day environment is, in my mind, as good as it's going to get for young people like you to start a company. So you're born at the right time and at the right age. So that's great. I want to take last minute to thank all the experts for the time. They've come from all over the world, by the way, some of them. So, and they've been brilliant. I mean, I've been in the business long enough, and I still learned something today. So thank you very much.